Welcome back, Honors. Welcome back to it. Welcome back to your flipped classroom in our continuing discussion of the rise of Rome, right? We are now, again, getting really into the deep and nitty-gritty parts of ancient Rome, right? Really, really emphasizing how they are super different from the Greeks and the things that make them fundamentally a very unique ancient civilization, right? And we left off last in class talking about the Gallic invasion, right? I know in fifth period, or first period, y'all got a little bit further than this. I know fifth period, we got a little bogged down because we were like, laughing and joking and being ridiculous. But the biggest thing about it, though, in general, right, we need to understand that after they get sacked by the Gauls, right, and sacked, by the way, means to get, like, pillaged, right, to get, like, stuff burned to the ground, get wrecked, right? They absolutely got wrecked. They took a big, big, big loss that first time around. But what's going to end up happening, though, is Rome is going to organize its military, right? It's going to organize its army into this thing known as the legion system, right? Where basically they created units in their military called the legion, right? That was full of thousands of soldiers of different types of units, right? Cavalry units, light troops, cohorts, reserves, like all of these different like elements to it, right? And this allowed them to be able to do this very famous phrase, which is known as to divide and conquer, right? If they wanted to actually send out different legions to different areas of Italy while they were expanding, they could send 2 legions over there to fight the Gauls, right? Or they could send 4 legions over there to fight the Achaii. Or they could send 5 legions over there to fight the Sicilians, right? They could do whatever they needed to do and split their army into multiple different factions, right? And it made them very, very formidable and very hard to stop. And it's going to cause them to expand through Italy very, very quickly. And literally by about the end of the BCs in 300, by about the beginning of like 299, 2849 BC, they have covered the entire Italian peninsula. Now, in the people that they are taking over, all these different individuals that they are taking over, what are they going to do with them, right? Well, they treat them a lot like the Persians did, right? They allowed conquered people to keep their customs, their religion. They just expected taxes and allegiance, right? They extended citizenship to a ton of them, especially the ones that were in Italy, which is a very large theme of Roman society, right? Extending citizenship to more of them through over time, and then allowing more of these people from places outside of Rome to even later on become parts of their government, right? Which is a really big deal. One of the later thinkers of Rome, a man by the name of Cicero, actually literally wasn't even from Rome proper, right? But he was elected to the Roman Senate, which is like a really, really big deal, right? Now, also on top of all that different stuff, though, on top of the fact that they were literally all fighting people that looked like this, right? Like that's what the people they were fighting looked like. This is what a Roman soldier looked like, though, right? And a lot of the things that make them stand out, right, that make them look more refined than a barbarian soldier, a lot of it has to do with their equipment, right? So, for example, the Roman military was not only better organized after being sacked by the Gauls, but they also were better equipped, right? They started developing a lot of new, interesting military technologies, things like the catapult that many of you have probably seen, which, by the way, they didn't throw rocks with that. Why would you throw a rock? That's pretty easy to dodge. Instead, what they threw in, actually was like burning pots of oil, right? They also had ballistas, which are these giant spear launchers and stuff like that. All of like Roman soldiers carried this thing called a gladius, which is a Roman-style longsword, right? And then also they developed this little invention right here. The Romans developed the very first crossbow, right? A very, very easy to train anybody on weapon. Really great for short distances, right? Now, the thing about it, though, also going into it as well, is that this right here is what the Romans were known for, is the things like this, their pilum spear, which is that thing right there behind the long, like, shield. The pilum spear was like a refined version of, like, a Greek spear. And then also, as well, these bad boys, you heard them coming because of their shoes, right? They had these things called caligas, right? C-A-L-I-G-A-E. Caligas are basically these boots that had like nails in the bottom of them, as you can see, that made them have like basically a metal sole. So if anybody ever got kicked to the ground, you could like kick them in the face or something like that. But it also made it so the Roman soldiers could travel over just about any terrain they needed to. Now, speaking of terrains that they could travel over, oftentimes they would be walking over roads, right? So something that you need to understand about the Romans is they built roads like everywhere, right? Every time they took something over, they would build a road like to actually access that different area of Italy, right? That's why it led to a very, very famous phrase that every one of you needs to write down. Every one of you needs this in your notes. I know that first period already has it because we talked about it in class, but you need to know this phrase because everybody that's ever had my West Civ class knows that all roads lead to Rome, right? And that phrase that is used heavily in a lot of like history classes basically actually just speaks to the Roman infrastructure, right? All roads lead to Rome, right? Say it with me again. All roads lead to Rome. Where do all roads go? Rome. That's exactly right, okay? Now, speaking of that, though, what it's referring to is the intricate types of road systems that the Romans built to connect their empire and share the fruits of their conquering with the new citizens of Rome, right? And so what they would do, though, is in these roads and these different little like trade roads and stuff like that, if you could find one of these roads, you could follow it back to Rome, as long as it was back in that general direction. Now, not all roads were as sophisticated as ones like this. This is the the Apnian Way. It is like the main Roman highway. And as you can see, it has flat stones on it. And actually, like, very sophisticated Roman roads had drainage ditches, stowed blocks, crushed stones and cement, slabs of cement, sand underneath them as well. They were super, super sophisticated. However, not all roads were like that. Some roads were just, like, strips of dirt that they had just walked over a bunch of times, right? But still, the big thing about it that you need to understand is that this road and infrastructure system is going to be another very major element of Roman society, because it's going to give them the ability to, as they expand, to bring things in easily, right? And to ship things out. It makes them actually a very, very efficient trade-based society, especially of land, right? Now, the Roman road system is just another element of Roman culture, but Roman culture itself and Roman history overall is divided into just 3 time periods. Now, Mr. Terry, why are you telling me about the 3 time periods of Rome now? Well, we like to do this just because we always focus, when we talk about Rome, on the idiosyncrasies and the things that make them different from ancient Greece, right? So now we're going to kind of pick up on where all these things fell in time, right? So there are only 3 time periods to ancient Rome, where there are 8 to ancient Greece, right? And the 3 time periods of ancient Rome are the kingdom, the republic, and the empire, right? Now, the kingdom, we've talked about a little bit already, because when we analyze Roman history, we kind of got to jump around a lot, right? Now, as you can see right here, by the way, that was 399 that happened, not 309. But the big thing about it, though, okay, when we're looking at this, when analyzing Roman history, you got to jump around a lot, right? Because, like, Romulus apparently stabbed Remus in 753. The very first Roman roads were built during the Republic period around 319 BC. Cincinnatus' dictatorship happened during the Republic period as well, around 458. And the Gauls actually sacked Rome during the Republic of Rome as well. Now, the thing that you need to understand, though, is that we were jumping around that timeline mainly just to kind of emphasize why all of these events were important, right? All roads lead to Rome. Romulus stabs Remus, creating Rome, hence why it's called Rome, because it's the city of Romulus, right? Cincinnatus' dictatorship establishes the dictator as a very, very important part of the Roman government, and the Gallic sacking of Rome also leads to them having a really strong army. You now know with those events, right, that basically Rome's culture is enigmatically different from that of Greece. Even though they look the same from the outside, they still do a lot of very, very different things, right? Now, speaking of different things, they got that kingdom, they got that republic, and they will eventually grow to an empire of that size, right? All this stuff in red right here is everything they controlled. They are one of the largest empires of the ancient world, very much on par with the Hellenistic Empire and the Persian Empire as well. But now we need to emphasize why the Roman Republic is so important, right? Like, so now, instead of talking about Greek democracy now, PP, we're now going to be talking about the Roman Republic. Look at this baby. All right, so yeah, we're going to talk about the Roman Republic, Pierre, okay? Are you okay with that? All right, so now look, big thing about it, though, going into it, we have to talk about the Roman Republic, both the time period and the government system, right? And we also need to discuss where it emanates out of and what it's symbolized by and things like that, right? Well, first and foremost, the socks that I was wearing today, that, you know what, I might double down and just wash them tonight and wear them again tomorrow just so we can emphasize the importance of these bad boys. SPQR, PP. You have to understand, buddy, that when you are emphasizing the culture of Rome and discussing its expansion as an ancient civilization, no 4 letters are probably more important than SPQR. These 4 letters were adopted after the end of the Kingdom period, after they ousted the last Etruscan ruler, and they entered into the Republic period. And what those 4 letters stand for, which are so important that even in the modern city of Italy, they slap these bad boys on manhole covers. It's so important because it means Senatus Populusque Romanum, which means the Roman Senate and people, right? The Roman Republic phase that we're discussing is going to venture on to be basically from 509 to 139 BC, before the struggle of the orders. And the thing that we need to understand, though, is that this style of government literally defines ancient Rome. It is what they are. It is what they do. It is their essence, and it is the thing that basically created them as such a unique civilization, such a dynamic civilization, and such a genius civilization as well. Because many elements of the government that they created that we're about to talk about, we actually still use in our modern-day government in the United States, right? Now, the better question, though, okay, is when we're looking at the civilization of Rome, which is settled on 7 different hills and stuff like that, where is the symbol of the Republic, right? Well, the Republic itself emanated out of this location, right? Now, when you were talking about the Roman Republic, many of you might be thinking, it's like, oh, is there a building that they did this in? Kind of like the Parthenon or some of the other buildings that were in ancient Greece, you like, blah, 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 like the Hippodrome? Well, that was in the Byzantine Empire. Well, that's a great question, and the answer is actually, interestingly enough, no. The Roman Republic and the government itself actually had only one location that it was in, but it volleyed around to different buildings all the time, right? And the Senate would meet in a different place, and the different citizen assemblies would meet in different places. But the main area where they would meet up and talk hang out and converse and have elections and address the people and all that stuff. It all happened in one general area. And it's much like the Agora of ancient Greece. And it's that place right there. It is known as the Forum of ancient Rome, right? F-O-R-U-M, the Forum, right? The Roman Forum, right? And where it is it's actually at the base of all 7 of the hills, right? The 7 hills that make up Rome, the Forum is right there smack in the middle of it, in a little valley, right? And it actually used to be a swampland, right? It was like super gross. Whenever Romulus and Remus were first there and stuff like that, floods used to make it very, very swampy and almost unusable. It's a trash pit. We found some of the oldest Roman bodies buried down there. One of the oldest Roman bodies we ever found was actually a little baby girl that was buried down there, and she had fine jewelry on and stuff like that, so we think she might have been from a wealthy family. But actually it was used as a trash pit, as a cemetery and stuff like that. But then after they actually built walls around the Tiber and stuff like that to control the flooding a little bit, it turned it into basically the city center, right? And the Forum was established right around 500 BC when they actually built those walls and actually turned it from an old swamp, cemetery, trash pit area into the most important place in the entire city. If you wanted to go talk to a government official, you went to the Forum. If you wanted to go buy something, you went to the Forum. If you wanted to go and discuss what the guy is running for next week, you went to the Forum. If you're a senator that's going to debate someone, you went to the Forum. Everything in the Forum was important. Unless you were a woman, you weren't allowed in there without male escort. But still, this is actually me standing in the Roman Forum. This is me actually being really uncomfortable in pictures and stuff like that, as you can tell. I stink at taking pictures. It's ridiculous. But that's me looking like I probably pooped my pants. And then this is me looking like I definitely pooped my pants with my wife, who's probably annoyed with me, telling her all these facts about, like, the Temple of Castor and Pollux and stuff like back here. There was actually a barbershop, like, right underneath it, like, right there for all the time being. But the thing about it, though, going into it is the Forum is the civic emanating point of their entire Republican government system, right? And it's surrounded by these bad boys, right? Jot a couple of these little elements down, little interesting facts about the Forum and stuff like that, because I'm definitely going to be asking you this stuff on a test. And it was actually all scattered around the outside of Rome were these things called triumphal arches, right? So every single time a Roman general would win a major battle or any kind of major, like, takeover of a group that they had been, like, fighting against for long periods of time, like Constantine got one. Caesar never did, which was weird. But this one is the one for Titus, right? But that is an arch, okay? These triumphal arches, they would have parades through them every single time another general did a thing and got called the Imperator for a day. It was really, really cool, actually, because they would have these giant city parades and stuff like that every single time a general was victorious, and he got to wear an all-purple toga that one day, right? An all-purple toga, and all the, like, fruits of the things that they had conquered and stuff would be paraded in front of him. He would be in the very, very back in this purple toga on a chariot, and a little boy would be whispering into his ear going, "Remember, you're not a god," right? Which is like, I need that in my life. I need it once before I die. And then also, as you can see, this is me right here standing at the base of a very large brick wall. There were actually apartment-style buildings that scattered all the way around around the Roman Forum. So it's crazy, y'all, when you think about it, that Romans literally lived in apartments, right? Like much more like the modern ones that we have now. And that wall that I'm standing at the base of is actually very, very close to what they actually originally looked like. Now, going into it, though, as well, there are some words you need to know when you're talking about the Forum and the Republic and the government system that emanated out of that central location, and they're right here. And what I'm going to do, though, is take 2 seconds, okay? I'm not going to spend much time on this. I want you to pause it real quick, write all those down, and then we'll go over them real fast. All right, welcome back. Yeah, thank you for pausing it and stuff like that. So here we go. The Republic, though, is a government ruled by a government ruled chosen by the people. Wow, dyslexia moment right there. I apologize about that. It is a government that is ruled by chosen people, okay? It is a representative democracy that is meant to try and actually make it so the people are in power, right? Because the people are choosing their own representatives into civic and legislative bodies, right? Including things like citizen assemblies and then later on the Senate, and there would be many other groups as well, including praetors and quaestors and like a lot of other different kind of figures like that. Censors would be a bigger one as well. But what a republic is supposed to be is direct rule by the people, right? Now, the thing about it, though, is interesting is that they did use the democratic values of Greeks and voting systems that Greeks did, right? Which is the element of democracy. But the thing about it, though, is that the republic that the Romans actually invented is very, very close to the one that we still use now, right, in America. Now, speaking of, though, as well, consuls were very important. It was one of the 2 chief officials elected to lead Rome. Think about this really quickly. I know I talked about this with Annalise in class one day. Like, you have to understand that Romulus and Remus were the 2 guys that founded Rome. So whenever they were, like, government was at peace, they had how many guys lead it? 2, right? So yeah, they had how many kings of Rome? 7. They had how many hills of Rome? 7, right? So there's a lot of repetition and repetitive cultural values that are related to historical things that happened in their actual essence, okay? But that's the 2 people that lead the entire thing. So get comfortable with that word, consul, right? Consul. A dictator is the person that we talked about very first, was that of Cincinnatus, is a ruler that only brought in during a time of war and then was supposed to step down. And the Senate, okay, is like the supreme council or highest governing body of Rome. Like if you had to point to one group of people and say they're the most powerful, it's the Senate, right? Because you like rule for life and stuff like that. There's several hundred of you, and you have to come from a very specific social class, okay? And we're going to get into that right now, okay? Now, another big thing that you need to understand as well about this, though, is that Rome did actually have a governing set of laws that actually was the thing that was very important to them, and it was known as the 12 Tables, right? Civil law that was governing their daily lives and stuff. It basically just talked about, like, who you could and could not sue and, like, different elements like that. But most of these things in Rome, like, they weren't even publicly posted, and, like, a lot of them just kind of functioned their day-to-day lives on trying to stay alive, right? There is no written constitution setting out Rome's government or setting up what Rome looked like. It's simply a system of adopted beliefs. Now, when you look at the American republic system that we have a constitution that actually creates the outline of how our government's supposed to work, right? And it is a binding document that says, this is what we're going to do, here's how many senators there are, here's how many House of Representatives there are, and every single time we need to change it a little bit, we amend it, right? Or we add amendments to them, okay? Well, the Romans never had that. They had the 12 Tables, which was their simple form of law and stuff like that, but the thing that they didn't have was like a constitution that set up the government. It simply was just tradition that they had operated off of for a long period of time. Speaking of tradition, they also had 2 social classes, right? The 2 societal classes that you would fall into in Rome if you were born there was either the patricians, which was the wealthy landowning class, right? Which was the super elite. You could call them aristocrats, nobles, or whatever, but what they were properly called in Rome was patrician. They are the ones who led the military during times of war, they worked in the Senate, and they were the only ones who actually knew the Roman law, right? Because they could read and write, and they were like studied in law and the creation of law systems as well. So they actually understood how this whole thing worked, right? Now, the thing about it, though, is you had to be born a patrician. There was no moving up into this class, but the bulk of Roman society, over 90%, were not the people sitting at this table being wealthy and stuff like that. By the way, this is how patricians ate all the time. They actually ate laying down constantly with little lap pillows and stuff, and they would eat at these little, like, tables that actually sat at the chest level, and you go like this. It's like, now, like so, and they ate everything with their hands. So, like, going into it, though, you have to understand that patricians, as you can see from that thing, are very, very wealthy, right? Now, going into it, though, then you also have plebeians, or the plebs, or the plebeians, right? The common people of Rome, which make up over 90% of the people of Rome. They are the ones who do everything else, right? So something that we need to understand about the plebeians or the plebeians, right, or the plebes is what everybody calls it. For example, if you want to basically call somebody basic and dumb and kind of refer to ancient Rome, you call them a plebe, right? Like, so somebody like starts sassing you or whatever in class, and you know that they're wrong and they're being stupid, like, shut up, plebe. But so now look, big thing about it, though, they are those commoners, right? They are the farmers, the soldiers, the craft workers, the merchants. But let's think about this for a hot second. In an ancient society, what other jobs are there to do other than farmer, craft worker, merchant, soldier? Nothing. Like they basically, what we need to understand, though, is the only reason that patricians are rich is because of the work of the plebes, right? The plebes are the ones who do everything, right? They farm, so they feed you. They're soldiers, so they defend you. They craft, so they make stuff that you're using at that table. And they're the merchants who sold it to you as well, right? So keep that in the back of your mind for a hot second, okay? Is that literally the entire economy and society of ancient Rome depends on the over 90% that also does not retain most of its wealth, right? Had a voice in the government, but could not be elected to public office, right? In the sense of they couldn't be in the Senate, right? The Senate had to have patricians in it, right? And there were only patricians allowed in it. So it's really screwed up when you think about it that the highest governing body, the most powerful group, was only the wealthiest of people. And also, here's the other kicker. Plebs paid the bulk of the taxes, right? And by the way, there was one other group of people in Roman society, slaves, right? There were large numbers of slaves that were brought in from conquered territories, just like the Spartans did, right? Whenever they took over somebody and they would lose in a war, they would bring large numbers of them into like the society as well, right? Now, an interesting little fact about slaves in ancient Rome, though, is many of them actually had the potential to possibly buy their freedom. But really quick, as we can tell, looking at this pleb right here, that looks exactly like Mr. Wooderson. So, like, looking at him, we need to understand, though, that guy right there, not wearing a toga. He's wearing a tunic. He's about to hit this other guy with a stick, apparently. The thing about it, though, is, as you can see, they didn't wear togas because they were very expensive, right? Now, looking at the Roman Republic as well, I'm going to cover this up because you don't need it, okay? You just need this diagram drawn in your notes, okay? When we're looking at the Roman Republic, there's something really, really important that you need to understand, right? That's what it looked like, all right? Their earliest version of their government was basically had 2 consuls at the top, a senate that was made up of only patricians, and citizen assemblies at the bottom, which is the only place that plebes could be voted into, right? And then, of course, they brought in a dictator during a time of war. So the thing that we need to understand about this whole essence, though, is that is how Roman society functioned and operated, okay? But we're going to talk more about this in class, okay? And we're going to talk about this huge event that went down during the later part of the Republic, known as the struggle of the orders, and how the Romans basically used games and stuff like that to keep poor people distracted from the inequalities in their society early on. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. I'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good one.